Hey, welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to talk about something that touches pretty much everything you buy, sell, or even own, international trade. You hear it all the time, that global trade is a win-win for everyone involved. But is it really that simple? Does every single country, every industry, and every person actually come out ahead? That is the big question we're going to dig into today. Okay, so to really get into this whole debate, we've got to go back to basics. Why do countries even bother trading with each other in the first place? Well, it all comes down to a really powerful and actually pretty simple idea in economics. All right, let's kick things off with a super simple example from our source material. Imagine a world with just two countries, the UK and India. Before they trade with each other, they're in a state called autarky, which is just a fancy word for being totally self-sufficient. So the UK makes 200 machines and 400 yards of cloth, and India makes 100 machines and 800 yards of cloth. Add it all up, and the entire world has 300 machines and 1,200 yards of cloth. They're both getting by, sure, but could they be doing better? Now, what happens if they stop trying to do everything themselves and just specialize? See, it turns out the UK is way more efficient at making machines. Economists call this comparative advantage. For the UK to make one machine, it only has to give up making 2 yards of cloth. For India, it's 8 yards. So it's kind of a no-brainer, right? The UK should just focus on making machines. And India, well, they have the advantage in making cloth, so they go all in on that. And just look at the new numbers. The UK is now cranking out 400 machines, and India is producing 1,600 yards of cloth. And this is where the magic happens. Look at the total world output now. Just by specializing and then trading with each other, the world suddenly has an extra 100 machines and an extra 400 yards of cloth that just didn't exist before. It's not actual magic, of course. It's just the power of being efficient. By working together, the entire economic pie gets bigger. Okay, that model is great in theory. It's clean, it's simple, but the real world, it's a lot messier. Because while making the pie bigger is great overall, it doesn't mean everyone gets an equal slice. In fact, it creates some very clear winners and some very clear losers. And look, you see the benefits of this everywhere. The fact that you can buy French wine, Japanese cars, or a smartphone with parts from a dozen different countries, that's all thanks to trade. All that new competition also helps drive down prices for things like clothes and electronics. This is the good news part of the story, and these benefits are spread out pretty widely for all of us as consumers. But there's always a but, isn't there? There's a flip side to this, and it has a very real human cost. This chart shows what was projected to happen to jobs in the U.S. textile industry. As it became cheaper to make clothes elsewhere, production moved. For apparel manufacturing specifically, that meant a projected job loss of over 55% in just one decade. And these numbers, they aren't just points on a chart. We're talking about real people, real families, and entire communities that were hit incredibly hard. And that really brings us to the heart of the whole problem, which is captured perfectly in this quote from our source. The economic pie gets bigger, no doubt about it. But the pain for those who lose their jobs is deep, and it's concentrated. This creates this huge political challenge. The big question is, can the winners, and there are a lot of them, somehow help out the losers and still come out ahead? And if so, how do you even do that? So, because of this tension between the winners and losers, governments naturally get involved. They're the ones who set the rules for trade, and they generally do one of two things. They either build walls to protect certain industries, or they build bridges to make trade even easier. When we talk about building walls, the most common tool in the toolbox is something called a tariff. Basically, it's just a tax you slap on stuff coming into the country. If you want to protect, say, your local car industry, you can put a tariff on foreign cars. That makes them more expensive, which gives your domestic car makers a fighting chance. The downside? Well, while you might be saving some jobs, it usually means everyone else pays higher prices. Now, on the flip side, countries also build bridges through trade agreements. You can almost think of these as different levels of economic friendship. At first, you have a free trade area, where a group of countries agrees to drop taxes on each other's goods. Then you can get closer and form a customs union, where you all agree on the same rules for trading with everyone else. The deepest level of all is an economic union, like the EU, where you might even share the same currency and policies. Okay, so with all this stuff, goods, services, money, flying back and forth across borders, how does anyone keep track? How does a country even know if it's in the red or in the black globally? Well, you can think of it like a giant national checkbook. And the main line item in that national checkbook is what's called the current account. This is pretty much the bottom line. It's a measure of everything a country earns from selling stuff to the world, its exports, minus everything it spends buying stuff from the world, its imports. It's the cleanest way to see if a country is a net seller or a net buyer. And what this bottom line means is actually pretty straightforward. If your country has a current account surplus, it means you're earning more from the world than you're spending. You're effectively a lender to the rest of the world. But if you have a current account deficit, you're spending more than you're earning, so you're a borrower. Now, one isn't automatically good and the other bad, but it does tell you a whole lot about how an economy fits into the global picture. All right, so you've got all these countries trading, putting up walls, building bridges, trying to balance their checkbooks. It gets complicated fast. So you gotta ask, who are the referees here? Who helps manage this massive, chaotic system? First up, you've got the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund. The easiest way to think of them is as the world's financial firefighters. When a country gets into deep financial trouble and can't pay its bills, the IMF might step in with an emergency loan to prevent a total collapse. But there's a catch. These loans come with some serious strings attached. They require the country to make some tough economic reforms. Next, you have the World Bank, and you don't want to get them confused with the IMF. While the IMF is putting out fires, the World Bank is more like a long-term construction crew. Their main job is to fight poverty. They give out loans and share expertise with developing countries to help them build big projects like roads, schools, and hospitals, the kind of stuff you need to build a healthy economy. And rounding out our big three is the WTO, the World Trade Organization. This is the main club where countries get together to hammer out the rules for global trade, and really importantly, it's also the place you go when things go wrong. It's like the official court for trade disputes. If one country thinks another is playing dirty, they can take their case to the WTO to get it sorted out. So let's step back for a second. We've seen how trade can magically grow the whole economic pie. We've seen the very real winners and losers. We've looked at the rules of the game, the walls and the bridges, and the referees who oversee it all. Which leaves us with one massive, lingering question for our time. As the world gets more and more tangled together, who actually gets to write the rules? And maybe more importantly, whose side will those rules be on? That's the real story of international trade, and it's still being written.